Donald Trump says he's preparing to make a, quote, final determination on a deal with Iran. The U.S. president said in a Truth Social post that he was going into a meeting in the White House Situation Room to decide. He also outlined some of what, from his perspective, should be in this agreement. Trump wrote that Iran must agree to never have a nuclear weapon. He added that ships caught in the Strait of Hormuz may start the process of heading home as the U.S. naval blockade will now be lifted. Iran's foreign ministry spokesman has responded saying no agreement has been finalized with the U.S. so far. Al Jazeera's chief U.S. correspondent Alan Fisher has more from the White House.
Certainly Donald Trump has made his red lines very clear again, that Iran can't have a nuclear weapon, that the Strait of Hormuz must be reopened quickly, and that Iran must also demine the strait as quickly as possible. Might be difficult for them, given that Donald Trump has said on a number of occasions that they've sunk all the mine hunters and minesweepers that the Iranian Navy has. So this is now just a waiting game. Clearly the Iranians are saying no final deal has been done. But there's a suggestion that the idea that the blockade has been lifted might be the first step. We've talked many times about how peace deals tend to be sequenced. You do this, then we do that. And if lifting the blockade is the first point, then opening the Strait of Hormuz would be the second point. It will be a gradual easing of the blockade, but it certainly opens up the idea that there might be some movement here. We've certainly heard from US officials over the last 24 hours. Donald Trump mentioned it on social media. Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, when he was in the briefing room on Thursday. And of course, J.D. Vance, the Vice President, who said that he believed the Iranians were negotiating in good faith. But there was some question about the idea of what happens to the enriched uranium. And it was all about language. And these documents tend to be that. The idea is that it would be a memorandum of understanding. This is the broad basis for an agreement. 60 days would then follow, and the intention would be that the Iranians would talk about the nuclear program and enriched uranium. Donald Trump has on a number of occasions said that the deal is virtually done, that the Iranians have agreed to a list of demands from the United States, and it's turned out not to be the case. He's done it on a number of Fridays, and here we are again on a Friday waiting to find out exactly what has been decided in that Situation Room meeting not far from where I'm standing here on the White House North Lawn.
And Iranian leaders have been responding to Trump's comments. Al-Migdad Al-Rahaid reports now from Tehran.
The first official reactions comes from Foreign Ministry spokesperson Ismail Baqai, and his message is very clear. The exchange of messages between Iran and the United States is continuing, but no final agreement has been reached. He also pushed back strongly on President Trump's tone, saying that Iran said goodbye to the language of Must 47 years ago, and stressing that Tehran makes decisions based only on what it sees as the interests and rights of the Iranian people. On the issue of the naval blockade and the Strait of Hormuz, Baqai said what the United States calls a blockade was, from Iran's perspective, an illegal action from the beginning of this war. And also, it's a violation of ceasefire and international freedom of navigation. And also, he added that Iran now wants to see whether this will be implemented, the naval blockade will be implemented as it announced, or whether it simply be, as he called, a propaganda claim. So the message from Tehran remains far more cautious today. So they are saying that the negotiation is continuing, but the key disputed remain unresolved. Al-Migdad Al-Rahaid, Al Jazeera, Tehran.
And joining me now for more is Scott Uehlinger. He's a former senior CIA officer and a national security expert. He joins us live from Philadelphia. Scott, good to have you on the program here. From your view, how important is it to reach a deal on Iran's nuclear program?
Well, certainly it absolutely is, and it has been a focus of many administrations for at least 30 years. The reason is, of course, that should the nuclear weapons be developed by Iran, then other nations in the area would immediately develop them on themselves. Or in the case of Saudi Arabia, they would be able to purchase them immediately from Pakistan, having funded that country's nuclear development. Also, we'd be looking at a nuclear Turkey as well, because it would be an insufferable situation for every other Middle Eastern country if Iran had the bomb. And so then it would be very similar to the development of the Soviet bomb against the United States. But in this case, it's in a much more volatile region. And that's why this has been a focus of the U.S. foreign policy for my entire professional career.
Yeah, when you were at the CIA, Scott, I understand you actually used to recruit Iranians to spy on their own nuclear program. Who did you recruit and what did you manage to learn from your spies?
Well, I can't really speak with great detail about it. However, I was in the vicinity of Iran, and you have to understand that the people of Iran despise their government. That's something I learned firsthand, having worked with many Iranian volunteers who were desperate to have the West understand the nuclear threat or the missile threat that Iran has, which then allows the United States and other countries to understand where they were and then to work against them. Like you may recall, there was something called Stuxnet, and that was a joint Israeli and U.S. program to basically corrupt and destroy the centrifuges that Iran was using for nuclear weapons development by introducing a computer virus. So it was through cooperation of CIA agents, Iranians who wished to destroy these tools of their hated regime that allowed the United States and Israel to perform these programs such as Stuxnet.
Now, from what you learned from your spies, you know, the JCPOA took more than 2 years to negotiate. Now you've got Donald Trump, who in 3 months are basically trying to reach a deal on Iran's nuclear program. Is that a reasonable assessment in terms of the time that it takes to reach an agreement with Iran on the nuclear program?
Right. That is a problem. Culturally, you know, the Iranians, even President Trump quoted, you know, the Iranians lose many wars, but they've never lost a negotiation. So they are some of the cagiest and shrewdest negotiators on the planet. You've got to be aware of that. President Trump has a tendency to want to rush deals, and that is not necessarily. However, what needs to be done is the devil is in the details. What has to be done is, for example, working against nuclear weapons. You can't just say that, all right, you're giving me your word. You need a very invasive inspection and verification program, which existed before in Iran with the IAEA was there. But Iran was constantly building underground cities no one knew about. Iran was constantly frustrating inspectors. And so that's the real thing that's going to happen during the 60-day, let's say, nuclear negotiation period. They're going to have to come up with a way that the United States and the world community can inspect and be satisfied that they are not secretly developing nuclear weapons in some facility that's buried in the middle of the desert. And that is the real problem with this negotiation.
Scott, we're having some issues with your audio connection, but I'm going to try to ask you one more question. I hope that our connection still works. Given all the info, all the intel that you've been able to receive regarding Iran's nuclear program, Donald Trump claimed in this post on Truth Social that the nuclear material is now buried deep underground following those U.S. strikes. What would it take for the U.S. to dig it out, wrap it up, pack it up, and take it away to destroy it?
It would take considerable resources. The United States has the ability to do that. We have the ability through airlift to bring in heavy equipment that will allow us to access that using U.S. technology and exfilling or removing that material. But that would involve, you know, construction of an airstrip, the use of an Iranian airstrip, and to some degree, some cooperation on the part of Iran. It would also require a fairly, you know, several hundred troops to provide security for such a large Air Force airlift operation. And so, again, that is something that may be a very good idea, but the planning and execution would be extremely complex.
All right, that's Scott Uehlinger, a former CIA officer and also national security expert, joining us live from Philadelphia. Scott, thank you so much for your time here on Al Jazeera.